The Zodiac is the pseudonym of an unidentified serial killer who murdered at least 5 people in the San Francisco Bay Area between December 1968 and October 1969. The Zodiac attacked 3 couples and a cab driver in Benicia, Vallejo, unincorporated Napa County, and the city of San Francisco. 2 of the Zodiac's 7 victims survived. In a series of letters mailed to Bay Area newspapers, the Zodiac took credit for the murders, described details known only to police, threatened bombings and more murders if the newspapers did not print his letters, and included cryptograms with his correspondence. 2 of the Zodiac's 4 cryptograms were decrypted in 1969 and 2020, and the other 2 remain unsolved. The Zodiac's last letter was received by the San Francisco Chronicle in 1974. In the letter, the Zodiac claimed to have killed 37 people, one of which was a 1966 murder of a woman in Riverside, California. Despite several theories about the Zodiac's true identity, the only suspect police named was Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1992. The Zodiac's murders, cryptograms, and letters to newspapers have made the case one of the most famous unsolved cases in American history. The Zodiac has become a fixture of popular culture, and the search for his identity continues to be pursued by amateur detectives all over the world. In 2004, the San Francisco Police Department marked the case inactive, but subsequently reopened the case in 2006. The California Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the City of Vallejo, and the Napa and Solano County sheriffs maintain the case status as open. Police and investigators concur the Zodiac attacked 7 people on 4 occasions in California. 5 victims died, 2 survived. David Arthur Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16, were shot and killed on December 20, 1968, on Lake Herman Road in Benicia. Michael Renaud Majot, 19, and Darlene Elizabeth Farron, 22, were shot around midnight between July 4 and 5, 1969, in the parking lot of Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo. Majot survived the attack. Farron died at Kaiser Foundation Hospital. Brian Calvin Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Ann Shepard, 22, were stabbed on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County. Hartnell survived. Shepard died from her injuries on September 29 at Queen of the Valley Hospital. Paul Lee Stein, 29, was shot and killed on October 11, 1969, in the Presidio Heights neighborhood of San Francisco. From 1969 to 1974, the Zodiac sent over 20 letters to newspapers, police, Chronicle writer Paul Avery, and attorney Melvin Belli. In the first sentence of the 3rd letter, the writer identified himself as, "This is the Zodiac speaking," and signed all his letters with a symbol resembling the crosshairs of a gun sight. 4 of the mailings included cryptograms, only 2 have been solved. The letters were postmarked in San Francisco and Pleasanton. The Zodiac's confirmed correspondence with date, recipient, and incipit. July 31, 1969, San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco Examiner, and Vallejo Times. 1/3 of Z408 cryptogram, enclosed with each letter. I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas. August 4, 1969, Examiner. This is the Zodiac speaking. October 13, 1969, Chronicle. Swatch of Paul Stein's shirt. I am the murderer of the taxi driver. November 8, 1969, Chronicle. Z340 cryptogram. The dripping pen card. I though you would need a good laugh. November 9, 1969, Chronicle. Bomb diagram. I have killed 7 people. December 20, 1969, Melvin Belli. Swatch of Stein's shirt. Happy Christmas. April 20, 1970, Chronicle. Z13 cryptogram. My name is. April 28, 1970, Chronicle. Greeting card. I hope you enjoy yourselves. June 26, 1970, Chronicle. Z32 cryptogram. I have become very upset. July 24, 1970, Chronicle. I am rather unhappy. July 26, 1970, Chronicle. Being that you will not wear some nice buttons. October 5, 1970, Chronicle. 13-hole punch card. You'll hate me. October 27, 1970, Paul Avery at Chronicle. Halloween card. From your secret pal. March 13, 1971, Los Angeles Times. I am crack-proof. January 29, 1974, Chronicle. The Exorcist letter. The first murders retroactively attributed to the Zodiac were the shootings of high school students Betty Lou Jensen, 16, and David Arthur Faraday, 17, on December 20, 1968. Faraday was a student at Vallejo High School, while Jensen was a student at Hogan High School. At 8:30 p.m. Faraday picked up Jensen, and the couple visited one of Jensen's friends. Sometime after 9 p.m., they drove to the outskirts of Vallejo and parked at a lover's lane on Lake Herman Road, 38.09491126839322, -122.1440865043165, just inside the Benicia city limits. Between 10:15 and 10:30 p.m., a passing motorist noticed the couple parked on a gravel runoff near the gate to a water pumping station. The couple was spotted again at 11 p.m. Between 11:05 and 11:10 p.m., Faraday and Jensen were attacked. Police determined that their assailant parked his vehicle about 10 feet alongside the passenger side of Faraday's car. He fired several shots at Faraday's car as he walked around to the driver's side. None of the shots hit Faraday and Jensen. The couple scrambled to get out through the passenger door. Jensen succeeded. As Faraday was exiting, the killer shot him in the head with a .22 caliber pistol. The assailant chased Jensen as she fled, firing 6 shots at her back. Only one missed. Police theorized the whole attack took 2 to 3 minutes. At 11:10 p.m., a motorist spotted the couple's bodies and alerted police. Jensen was dead. Faraday was still breathing. He died at the hospital. There were no witnesses and no usable tire or footprints. The only motive the police could deduce was a madman wanting to kill. Despite an intense investigation in the following months, no viable suspects emerged. The murders were extensively covered by the media. Darlene Ferrin, 22, and Michael Mageau, 19, were shot shortly after midnight on July 4, 1969. Ferrin was popular in Vallejo due to her job at a local restaurant, where she met Mageau. On July 4, they went on a date despite the fact that Ferrin was married. After 11:30 p.m., Ferrin received a phone call at her house. She arrived at Mageau's house around 11:50 p.m. Immediately after leaving Mageau's house, the couple noticed they were being followed by a man in a light-colored car. Ferrin drove out of Vallejo in the direction of Lake Herman Road. Shortly before midnight, she turned her car into an empty parking lot at Blue Rock Springs Park. This was another lover's lane, located just 2 miles from Lake Herman Road. Ferrin either parked or stalled 70 feet from the lot entrance. Another vehicle parked about 80 feet to their left. The driver turned his headlights off and sat motionless. Mageau asked who the driver was. Ferrin told him not to worry. The stranger abruptly tore away from the parked couple. 5 minutes later, the stranger returned, parked a few feet next to Mageau's side of the car and got out. He shone a flashlight into Ferrin's car as he approached. Assuming he was a police officer, the couple rolled down Mageau's window. Without speaking, the stranger fired a 9mm pistol into the car. One bullet hit Mageau in the right arm, and the other hit Ferrin in the neck. Mageau tried to leave the car, but his door handle was missing or removed. The assailant returned to his car, opened the door, and did something Mageau could not see. As Mageau struggled to exit the vehicle, the stranger shot him and Ferrin 2 more times each. The killer hurried into his car and drove off. A golf course caretaker heard the shots around 12:10 a.m. The perpetrator left no clues that could be traced back to him. 3 teenagers drove into the parking lot, saw the wounded couple, and got help. Police arrived at 12:20 a.m. 20 minutes later. Ferrin was pronounced dead at the hospital. Mageau survived and described the attacker as a heavy-set white man, around 5 feet 8 inches tall. He estimated the assailant's weight as 195 to 200 pounds, with a large face and curly light brown hair. The killer wore dark clothes and no glasses. These details were not enough to develop a suspect. Moments after 12:40 a.m., the Vallejo Police Department, VPD, received a phone call from a payphone 2 blocks from headquarters. The man on the other end of the line said, "I want to report a double murder. If you go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Serial killers will commonly pause to reflect on their actions. Authors Michael Kelleher and David Van Nuys speculated that the 7 months between the attacks on Lake Herman Road and at Blue Rock Springs was a cooling-off period for the Zodiac. Many have speculated that Darlene Ferrin knew her killer. Kelleher and Nuys credit the origin of the theory to Robert Graysmith's 1986 book Zodiac. He argued extensively for a connection based on interviews with Farron's friends. A definitive connection has not been proven. Majot gave conflicting accounts on whether Farron knew her killer. At the hospital, he stated he did not know the murderer. At another point, he said the assailant's name was Richard. Farron's sister claimed one of Darlene's boyfriends was named Richard. 13. In the Zodiac's later correspondence, he only ever refers to Farron as girl. In Graysmith's telling, Farron and Majot were chased. They only stopped when their car hit a log and stalled. The detective on the scene noticed that the car was still on and in low gear. Kelleher and Nyes suggest that Farron would not tell Majot to ignore the mystery driver, nor would they assume he was a police officer, if they had not stopped at the spot by choice. On August 1, 1969, the Vallejo Times, San Francisco Chronicle and San Francisco Examiner all received letters written by someone taking credit for the attacks in Vallejo. The 3 letters were nearly identical and began, "I am the killer of the 2 teenagers last Christmas at Lake Herman and the girl last 4th of July." The 3 letters were rife with misspellings and presented the first definitive link between the 2 separate attacks in Vallejo. Enclosed in all 3 letters was a different cryptogram. They combined to form a 408-symbol cipher, Z408. The writer claimed, "In this cipher is my identity, sick." He demanded the codes be printed on each newspaper's front page. If they were not, he threatened to cruise around all weekend killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again, until I end up with a dozen people over the weekend. The Chronicle published its third of the cryptogram inside the August 2 edition. In the accompanying article, Vallejo Police Chief Jackie Stiltz said, "We're not satisfied that the letter was written by the murderer." He requested the killer send more facts to prove his identity. 17. On August 4, the Examiner received a letter with the salutation, "Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This letter marked the debut of the Zodiac persona. It was the first time the killer called himself by this nickname. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is when I die I will be reborn in paradise and all the I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name because you will try to slow down or atop my collectiog of slaves for my afterlife. Ebioria temet piti." VPD asked a psychiatrist at the California Medical Facility in Vacaville to analyze the Zodiac's message. The doctor concluded the writer felt omnipotent based on his fantasy about collecting spiritual slaves. The analysis described the Zodiac as someone you would expect to be brooding and isolated. The psychiatrist speculated the killer's praise of murder over sex could be an expression of inadequacy. At 4 p.m. on September 27, 1969, Pacific Union College students Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were picnicking at Lake Berryessa on a small island connected by a sand spit to Twin Oak Ridge. Sometime later, Shepard noticed a man watching them. When he emerged from behind a tree, he put on a black executioner's hood with clip-on sunglasses. He wore a bib with a white 3x3 symbol on it. He brandished a gun, which Hartnell believed was a .45. The Zodiac said he escaped from jail after killing a guard and needed their car and money to travel to Mexico. Before tying up Shepard, the Zodiac made Shepard bind Hartnell with pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline. He tightened Hartnell's bonds because Shepard's knots were too loose. Hartnell still believed they were being robbed when the Zodiac drew a knife and stabbed them. Hartnell suffered 6 wounds and Shepard 10. The Zodiac hiked 500 yards to Knoxville Road, leaving several footprints for investigators to study. The killer drew the symbol on Hartnell's car door with a black felt tip pen and wrote beneath it, Vallejo December 20, 68. The 4th of July 69. September 27, -69 to 6:30 by knife. After hearing the victim's screams, a fisherman and his son sought help. Hartnell untied Shepard's ropes with his teeth, and she freed him. 2 park rangers arrived and tended to the stricken couple until the ambulance arrived. Napa County deputies Dave Collins and Ray Land responded to the report of the attack. Shepard was conscious and gave a detailed description of their attacker. She and Hartnell were taken to a hospital in Napa. Shepard lapsed into a coma during transport. She never regained consciousness and died 2 days later. Hartnell survived to recount his tale to the press. Earlier that day, a suspicious man had been seen around Lake Berryessa by several people. A dentist and his son saw a heavy-set man looking at them from a distance before he hurried off. Around 2:50 p.m., 3 women noticed a strange man as they stopped on their way to Lake Berryessa. After they had arrived to sunbathe, they noticed the man again. Since they had potentially seen the Zodiac without his hood, the women worked with Napa Valley Register photographer Robert McKenzie to create a composite sketch using an identikit facial compositing device. Police showed the image to other potential witnesses. The suspect was described as being roughly 6 feet tall and weighing 200 pounds, which matched the descriptions by Shepard and Hartnell. Graysmith also drew a sketch of the Zodiac's costume after Hartnell described it to him. Napa County Detective Ken Narlow was assigned to the case from the outset and worked on solving the crime until his retirement in 1987. The Zodiac drove 27 miles from the crime scene to a car wash in downtown Napa. He used a payphone to call the Napa County Sheriff's Department at 7:40 p.m. He told the dispatcher he wished to report a murder, no, a double murder, and confessed to the crime. He did not hang up the phone. KVON radio reporter Pat Stanley found the phone off the hook a few minutes later. The payphone was located a few blocks from the sheriff's office. Detectives lifted a wet palm print from the phone but were never able to match it to any suspect. The last confirmed Zodiac murder took place 2 weeks after the Lake Berryessa attacks. Around 9:40 p.m. on October 11 in downtown San Francisco, the Zodiac hailed a cab which was driven by a doctoral student named Paul Stine. The killer gave a destination in Presidio Heights. When the taxi arrived at Washington and Maple Streets, the killer asked to be driven another block. At Washington and Cherry around 9:55 p.m., the Zodiac shot Stine in the head with a handgun and took his wallet and car keys. 3 teenagers witnessed the crime from a house directly across the street from Stine's cab. The Zodiac's face was clearly visible by streetlight. The teenagers watched as the Zodiac wiped down the vehicle and rifled through Stine's clothes. He left behind 2 partial fingerprints from his right hand. While the Zodiac was tending to the cab, the kids called the San Francisco Police Department, SFPD. They described the criminal as a husky, white man in a dark or black jacket. The dispatcher mistakenly alerted SFPD that the suspect was black. Just 2 minutes after the call to SFPD, 2 nearby patrol officers responded to the radio dispatch. They encountered a white man in dark clothes walking north towards the Presidio Army base. They pulled alongside the man and asked if he had seen anything suspicious. The man confirmed he had seen someone waving a gun and heading east. The officers hurried away. The Zodiac later claimed he was the witness that spoke to the 2 officers. When police arrived at the scene, Stine was declared dead. SFPD canvassed the area, including the Presidio. The Zodiac had probably fled the area in a car by then. Police assumed the murder was a result of the robbery. However, the Zodiac mailed a bloody piece of Paul Stine's shirt to the San Francisco Chronicle on October 13. He enclosed it in a letter where he boasted about the murder and claimed to have clandestinely watched SFPD search for him. The Zodiac also threatened to shoot a tire on a school bus and kill children as they exited. The teenage witnesses helped a police artist make a composite sketch of the man they saw at Stine's cab. The 2 patrol officers who questioned the witness near the scene realized it may have been the Zodiac. They also helped develop a sketch of the suspect. SFPD detectives Bill Armstrong and Dave Toshi were assigned to the case. Toshi ended up working on the case by himself and filled 8 filing cabinets with potential suspects. In 1976 he told the Associated Press that Zodiac's letters were an ego game. He believed the killer lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's a weekend killer. Why can't he get away Monday through Thursday? Does his job keep him close to home? I would speculate he maybe has a menial job, is well thought of and blends into the crowd. I think he's quite intelligent and better educated than someone who misspells words as frequently as he does in his letters. After working on the Zodiac case for 7 years, Toshi started writing anonymous letters praising his own investigative work to Chronicle columnist Armistead Maupin. 2 years later in 1978, Toshi was removed from the case and demoted to pawnshop detail. He expressed regret for the hoax. That same year, Maupin also received a purported Zodiac letter. SFPD investigated whether Toshi wrote it as well and concluded he did not. On October 22, 1969, mental patient Eric Weil duped attorney Melvin Belli into a conversation on KGO-TV's AM San Francisco. Investigators concluded Weil was not the Zodiac. He called the Oakland Police Department and demanded to speak to Belli or F. Lee Bailey on television. During the show, Weil told Belli he would not reveal his identity for fear of being executed. He arranged a rendezvous with Belli on Mission Street in Daly City and did not show. On November 8, the Zodiac mailed a card with a 340-character cryptogram, Z340, to the Chronicle. He asked for his code to be printed on the front page. It remained unsolved for 51 years. One cryptologist ranked Zodiac's unsolved ciphers second only to the Voynich manuscript. Zodiac ciphers were crowdsourced through a variety of websites, which led to gradual breakthroughs. Z340 was deciphered by an international team of private citizens on December 5, 2020. The cryptology group included American software engineer David Oranchik, Australian mathematician Sam Blake and Belgian programmer Jarl van Eyck. Using a program made by Van Eyck called AZ-Decrypt, the team ran 650,000 possible solutions for the cipher until the program came up with the best possible encryption key. In the decrypted message, the Zodiac denied being the Sam who spoke on AM San Francisco and explained he was not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. The team submitted their findings to the FBI's Cryptographic and Racketeering Records Unit, which verified the decryption and concluded the decoded message gave no further clues to the Zodiac's identity. Subsequent analysis confirmed the Z340 decryption using unicity distance as a measure. The decoded Z340 cipher included the usual Zodiac respellings. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show which bringo up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber. Becca Ace, it will send me to paradise all the sewer because he now have enough slaves to war for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I ve now that my new life will be an easy one in paradise death. On November 9, the Zodiac mailed a 7-page letter to the Chronicle. In his postscript, he claimed he was stopped and questioned by 2 policemen 3 minutes after he shot Stein. He threatened to blow up a school bus and included a diagram of the bomb. The Zodiac boasted police would never catch him because, I have been too clever for them. The Chronicle excerpted the letter on November 12. 1 year after the Lake Herman Road murders on December 20, the Zodiac mailed a letter to Melvin Belly. He enclosed another swatch of Paul Stein's shirt. He pleaded, "Please help me, I am drowning. I cannot remain in control for much longer." For the remainder of 1970, the Zodiac continued to communicate with authorities and the press by mail. In a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle postmarked April 20, he wrote, "My name is." It was followed by a 13-character cipher, Z13, which has not been definitively solved. The Z13 cipher. The cryptologist Craig P. Bauer proposed the solution. Alfred E. Newman, the mascot of humor magazine Mad. Ryan Garlick, a University of North Texas computer science and engineering professor, used the key to the Z340 to get the solution, Dr. Ida Torpedo. Garlick believes that this is an insult directed at D.C.B. Marsh, then president of the American Cryptogram Association, who had publicly challenged Zodiac to reveal his full name in a cipher. In the same letter, the Zodiac denied responsibility for the fatal bombing of an SFPD police station in Golden Gate Park. He added, "There is more glory to killing a cop than a SID because a cop can shoot back." He also included a diagram of another school bus bomb. At the bottom of the diagram, he wrote, equals 10, SFPD equals 0. On April 28, 1970, the Zodiac mailed a greeting card to the Chronicle. He wrote, "I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast." On the back of the card, the Zodiac threatened to use his bus bomb unless 2 things happened. The Chronicle should write about his bomb, and people should wear some nice Zodiac buttons. In a letter to the Chronicle postmarked June 26, 1970, the killer was upset no one was wearing Zodiac buttons. He claimed, "I punished them in another way. I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a .38. This may have been a reference to the murder of SFPD Sergeant Richard Raditich. He was shot through the window of his squad car by an unidentified gunman during a routine traffic stop. 51. Raditich's murder is unsolved, but the SFPD denies that Zodiac is a suspect in the case. A Phillips 66 road map of the San Francisco Bay Area was enclosed with the letter. At Mount Diablo, the Zodiac drew a modified symbol as a compass rose. The cardinal points were labeled 0, 3, 6, 9 clockwise from the top. The Zodiac confirmed that O to be set to Mag. N. The letter concluded with a 32-character cipher, Z32. The Zodiac claimed that the map and the cipher would reveal where he had buried his bomb. Z32 has never been definitively decoded and no bomb was ever located. In another letter, the Zodiac explained, "The Mount Diablo code concerns radians plus #inches along the radians." In 1981, Gareth Penn deduced that when the map was divided as per the Zodiac's hint, 3 of his attacks aligned along one radian. On one arm of the radian lay the Blue Rock Springs and Lake Herman Road murders. The other arm of the radian centered on Mount Diablo extended to the site of Paul Stein's murder. Hundreds of solutions to the Z13 and Z32 have been proposed and, according to Oranchik, it is practically impossible to determine if any of them are correct, due to how short the ciphers are. On October 7, 1970, the Chronicle received a 3x5-inch card, nicknamed the 13-hole punch card, signed by Zodiac with the symbol and a small cross reportedly drawn in blood. 13 holes were punched across the card, and its message was formed by pasting type from the Chronicle. Bill Armstrong and Dave Toschi agreed it was highly probable that Zodiac sent the card. On October 27, 1970, Paul Avery received a Halloween card signed by Z alongside the symbol. A handwritten note read, "Peek-a-boo, you are doomed." The Chronicle covered this threat on its front page. The card's postmark was from a San Francisco mailbox that afternoon. 57. The implication of a 14th Zodiac victim was speculated based on the phrase, 14, found in the card. Avery refused police protection and started carrying a pistol. His colleagues wore, "I am not Avery" buttons. Shortly after the Halloween card, Avery also received an anonymous letter about the parallels between the 1966 murder of Sherry Jo Bates and the Zodiac. In a March 13, 1971, letter to the Los Angeles Times, the Zodiac taunted police and claimed 17 victims. Zodiac expert Tom Voigt theorized that the letter's postmark was a joke about an unpleasant letter coming from a town called Pleasanton. Zodiac remained silent for nearly 3 years. The Chronicle received a letter from the Zodiac, postmarked January 29, 1974 from San Mateo County. It complained that columnist Count Marco needed to feel superior to everyone, and praised The Exorcist, 1973, as the best satirical comedy, sick, that I have ever seen. The letter included part of a verse from Tit Willow's song, In the Mikado, and an unusual symbol at the bottom that has remained unexplained. Zodiac concluded the letter with a new score, Me equals 37, SFPD equals 0. Psychiatrist David Van Nuys theorized Zodiac stopped killing because he had multiple personality disorder. It may have lessened over time, as it often can, which would also explain the reduced intensity of Zodiac's letters. Many more unconfirmed Zodiac letters were sent to the media. On August 1, 1973, a letter was mailed to the Albany Times-Union in New York. The return address was the symbol. The writer promised to kill again on August 10. A 3-line code in the letter was supposed to reveal the name and location of the victim. FBI cryptanalysts deciphered the code as redacted by the FBI, Albany Medical Center. This is only the beginning. No murder matched the details in the letter, and the handwriting was not a definitive match for Zodiac's. The Chronicle received a letter postmarked February 14, 1974, explaining that the Symbionese Liberation Army's initials spelled out an Old Norse word meaning, kill. The SLA had recently kidnapped newspaper heiress Patricia Hearst. The handwriting was not authenticated as the Zodiac's. A letter to the Chronicle postmarked May 8, 1974, opined that Badlands, 1973, was murder glorification, and asked the paper to remove its advertisements. Signed by a citizen, the handwriting, tone and sarcasm were similar to Zodiac's letters. The Chronicle also received an anonymous letter postmarked July 8, 1974, complaining about anti-feminist columnist Marco Spinelli. The letter was signed, The Red Phantom, Red with Rage. In 2007, an American Greetings Christmas card was discovered in the Chronicle's photo files. Its postmark was from 1990 in Eureka. The card was handed over to the Vallejo police. A photocopy of 2 United States Post Office keys on a magnet keychain was enclosed. The handwriting on the envelope resembled Zodiac's, however, a forensic document examiner deemed it inauthentic. The discovery electrified Zodiac researchers. It suggested the killing spree may not have been stopped by death or imprisonment and that the Zodiac might be alive. There is no consensus regarding the number of victims the Zodiac killer killed or the length of his criminal spree. In 1976, SFPD Detective Dave Toschi said, "We know for sure he killed at least 6, and the Zodiac had a personal box score of 37. Robert Graysmith estimated 49 Zodiac victims. 308 to 11 Many murders and attacks in the 1960s and 1970s were seen as possible Zodiac crimes, but none have been confirmed." Raymond Davis. On April 9, 1962, a man called the police in Oceanside, California, and said, "I am going to pull something here in Oceanside and you'll never be able to figure it out." At 11:10 p.m. on April 10, cab driver Raymond Davis, 29, told his dispatcher he was taking a fare to South Oceanside. The next day, his body was found near the mayor's house in St. Malo, a gated community in Oceanside. Days later, the suspected killer called the police again. "Do you remember me calling you last week and telling you that I was going to pull a real baffling crime? I killed the cab driver and I am going to get me a bus driver next." Following this call, the police began to place armed guards on buses. In 2019, the unsolved murder was connected to the Zodiac when Christy Hawthorne, the director of the Oceanside Historical Society, was researching St. Malo for another project. She stumbled upon a story about Davis's murder and further research dug up several parallels to the Zodiac killings. Davis's murder foreshadowed Paul Stein's by 7 years. Both cabbie murders involved wealthy neighborhoods. Both victims were 29 years old. The ammunition was .22 caliber, which matches the Lake Herman Road attack. The taunting of police and the threat against buses was also followed the Zodiac, clarify. Hawthorne presented her findings to the Oceanside Police Department, which began an inquiry. Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards. On June 2, 1963, on the beach at Tajiguas in Santa Barbara County, California, an unidentified sniper fired 2 shots from a .22 caliber gun at a group of teenagers. None of them were hit. On June 4, on a beach within Gaviota State Park, just west of Tajiguas, Robert George Domingos, 18, and his fiancée Linda Faye Edwards, 17, were shot dead by an unidentified person. They were at the beach while skipping school at Lompoc High School for Senior Ditch Day. On June 5, when the couple had not returned home, their parents called the police. During a police search, several of the couple's belongings, like Edwards' purse, were inside Domingos' car. Police believed that the assailant attempted to bind the couple with pre-cut rope. This was the same modus operandi as the Lake Berryessa attacks. It is likely that when the victims got loose and tried to flee, the killer shot them repeatedly in the back and chest. Domingos was shot 11 times and Edwards 8 times. The killer placed their bodies in a small shack nearby and tried to burn it to the ground. The firearm was probably a .22 caliber semi-automatic rifle, like the Tajiguas and Lake Herman Road incidents. The Winchester Western Super X copper-coated bullets also matched the Zodiac's. The lot number of the .22 ammunition was traced to an April purchase from a store in Santa Barbara. The only other place that lot number turned up was at Vandenberg Air Force Base near Lompoc. Investigators looked into purchases of the ammunition at both locations. In a 1972 press conference, Santa Barbara County Sheriff John Carpenter stated, "There now appears to be a high degree of probability that the Zodiac committed the murders, and, although the anticipated response to this statement would be one of skepticism, let me say that we do not make this assertion frivolously." When SFPD detectives Bill Armstrong and Dave Toshi investigated the murders in 1972, Toshi said a connection is possible. A classmate of Domingos and Edwards, who later became a clinical psychologist and police officer, said in 2011, "I believe the murders were the work of the Zodiac killer, but I can't prove it." Sherry Jo Bates. On October 30, 1966, Sherry Jo Bates, an 18-year-old student at Riverside City College, RCC, spent the evening at the campus library annex until it closed at 9 p.m. Neighbors reported hearing a scream around 10:30. Her father reported her missing, and she was found dead the next morning at 6:30 a.m. She was found a short distance from the library, between 2 abandoned houses slated to be demolished for campus renovations. She had been brutally beaten and stabbed to death. The wires in her Volkswagen's distributor cap had been pulled out. A man's paint-spattered Timex watch with a torn wristband was found nearby. The watch stopped at 12:24, but police believe that the attack had occurred much earlier. 1 month later, on November 29, nearly identical typewritten letters were mailed to Riverside Police and the Riverside Press Enterprise, titled, "The Confession." The author claimed responsibility for the Bates murder, providing details of the crime that were not released to the public. The author warned that Bates is not the first and she will not be the last. In December 1966, a macabre poem was discovered carved into the bottom side of a desktop in the RCC library. Titled, "Sick of Living, Unwilling to Die," the poem's language and handwriting resembled that of the Zodiac's letters. It was signed with what were assumed to be a set of lowercase initials, RH, inscribed below. During the 1970 investigation, Sherwood Morrill, California's top question documents examiner, expressed his opinion that the poem was written by the Zodiac. On March 13, 1971, 5 months after Avery's article linking the Zodiac to the Bates murder, clarify, the Zodiac mailed a letter to the Los Angeles Times. In the letter, he credited the police, instead of Avery, for discovering his Riverside activity, But they are only finding the easy ones, there are a hell of a lot more down there. The connection between Bates and the Zodiac remains uncertain. Enadine Molina and Fermín Rodríguez. On June 8, 1967, Enadine Molina, 35, and Fermín Rodríguez, 36, were parked on Vallecillos Road in Alameda County. A stranger approached and told them to get out of the car. Rodríguez was fatally shot and Molina was abducted. The killer stopped near Sinol Regional Wilderness. Molina tried to escape and was killed. And robbery were ruled out as motives. The murders occurred near Pleasanton. The March 1971 Zodiac letter to the Los Angeles Times was postmarked in Pleasanton. John Franklin Hood and Sandra Garcia. On February 21, 1970, John Franklin Hood, 24, and his fiancée, Sandra Garcia, 20, visited East Beach in Santa Barbara. The couple left their Santa Barbara home at 6 p.m. early the following day. Their fully clothed bodies were discovered under their blanket. Hood was stabbed 11 times, mainly in the face and back. Garcia received the brunt of the vicious attack, leaving her almost unrecognizable. The bone-handled 4-inch fish knife used in their murder was partially buried in the sand beneath the blanket. There appeared to be no sexual interference, and robbery was ruled out. The double murder was similar to the 1963 killing of Domingos and Edwards, 30 miles west. It also paralleled the 1969 Lake Berryessa attack. Kathleen Johns. On the night of March 22, 1970, Kathleen Johns, 22, was driving to Petaluma with her 10-month-old daughter. Johns was also 7 months pregnant. She left San Bernardino at 4:30 p.m. At 11:30 p.m. on Highway 132 near Patterson, a vehicle behind her blinked its lights. A man pulled alongside and convinced her to pull over because her left rear wheel was loose. He fixed it, but when she pulled away it immediately fell off. Johns told Paul Avery that the man offered to drive her to a gas station that was in sight just up the road. Johns asked the man if he always helped strangers this way. He replied, "By the time I get through with them, they won't need my help." He drove past the gas station and kept Johns captive for 2 hours. He told her repeatedly, "You know I'm going to kill you." When he abruptly stopped, Johns jumped out of the car with her infant and hid in an irrigation ditch. The man searched for her with a flashlight before leaving. A passing farmer drove Johns to a police station in Patterson. When she saw the wanted poster from Paul Stein's murder, she exclaimed, "Oh my God, that's him." Johns's car was found in flames on Highway 132. A few months later, the Zodiac referenced this kidnapping in a letter to the Chronicle. Richard Raditich. Around 5:25 a.m. on June 19, 1970, SFPD Sergeant Richard Phillip, Rich, Raditich, 25, was shot 3 times by a .38 caliber revolver. He was serving a parking ticket in Haight-Ashbury when he was shot through the driver's window of his squad car. The SFPD started assigning 2 officers to every patrol car. A week later, the Zodiac claimed to have shot a man in a parked car with a .38. Police never found direct evidence that Zodiac killed Raditich. In 2004, the SFPD reopened the Raditich investigation. Donna Lass. Registered nurse Donna Lass, 25, was last seen on September 6, 1970, in State Line, Nevada. She worked at the Sahara Tahoe Casino until 2 a.m. that morning. Her boss and landlord both received phone calls from an anonymous man who claimed Lass had an illness in her family and would not be returning. Her car was parked near her apartment, which was undisturbed. Paul Avery received a Lake Tahoe postcard several months later with potential connections to Lass' disappearance. Like the 13-hole punch card, placed over the original image is a collage of phrases like, "peek through the pines," "around in the snow." It also said, "sought victim 12 inches" and included the symbol. In 1986, the Placer County Sheriff's Office located a skull near Emigrant Gap along California State Route 20 in the Sierra Nevada. The South Lake Tahoe Police Department began investigating a connection to the Zodiac killing spree in 2001. DNA profiling determined it was Donna Lass' skull in 2023. Potentially related serial murders. Astrological murders. The astrological murders were committed by a suspected serial killer who was also active in the same region of California and around the same time as the Zodiac. Police across multiple jurisdictions made a tentative connection between a single culprit and at least a dozen unsolved homicides that occurred between the late 1960s and early 1970s. All of the victims were female and were killed in a variety of ways, including strangulation, drowning, throat cutting and bludgeoning, occasionally after being drugged. The killings were linked because victims were dumped in ravines and killed in conjunction with astrological events, such as the winter solstice, equinox and Friday the 13th. Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. The Zodiac was also suspected of being the perpetrator behind the Santa Rosa hitchhiker murders. Between 1972 and 1973, at least 7 female hitchhikers were murdered in Sonoma County and Santa Rosa. In the Zodiac's January 29, 1974, exorcist letter to the Chronicle, he claims 37 victims. A symbol in that letter matched Chinese characters on a soy barrel carried by one of the Santa Rosa victims. The Zodiac had warned he would vary his modus operandi in a previous letter: "When I commit my murders, they shall look like routine robberies, killings of anger, plus a few fake accidents, etc." One of the main Zodiac suspects, Arthur Lee Allen, was also suspected of being the Santa Rosa killer. In April 2004, the SFPD cited caseload pressure and marked the Zodiac case inactive. By March 2007, they reactivated the case. The case remains open in Riverside and Napa County. In 2018, the Vallejo Police Department attempted to use GED match to catch the Zodiac. They did not receive definitive results. The FBI's investigation was still ongoing as of 2020, needs update, although Voight claims the case is no longer being investigated as of 2025. In 2009, The Guardian reported that the SFPD had investigated an estimated 2,500 Zodiac suspects, and only a half dozen of them were seen as credible by the department. Richard Grinnell, who runs the website Zodiac Ciphers, stated in 2022 that there are probably 50 or 100 suspects named every year. The only man ever named by the police as a suspect is Arthur Lee Allen, a former elementary school teacher and convicted sex offender who died in 1992. Allen denied being the Zodiac. He was interviewed by police from the early days of the investigation, and was subject to several related search warrants over a 20-year period. In 2007, Robert Graysmith said that several detectives described Allen as the most likely suspect. In 2010, Dave Toshi stated that all the evidence against Allen ultimately turned out to be negative. Other suspects widely seen as viable by professional or amateur investigators include Earl Van Best Jr., Gary Francis Post, Giuseppe Bevilacqua, Lawrence Kane, Paul Dorr, Richard Gaikowski, Richard Marshall, and Marvin Margolis. In 2020, the Chronicle called the Zodiac case the most famous unsolved murder case in American history. The unusual nature of the spree has sustained international interest for years. A cottage industry of zodiologists sprung up in the wake of the killings. They try to solve the case and have informal annual meetings. Several websites collect information about the crimes and ciphers. Dozens of books and documentaries have focused on the Zodiac. The original and most influential amateur book was Robert Graysmith's Zodiac, 1986. He was working at the San Francisco Chronicle as a cartoonist while the Zodiac was corresponding with the paper. Graysmith compiled his research into an authoritative investigation that remains a touchstone for other researchers. John Bowman published the book The Allen Files, containing Arthur Lee Allen's military records. That was followed with Zodiac Killer, Fact versus Fiction. Theories about the Zodiac's identity are rampant. In Zodiac, Graysmith refers to Arthur Lee Allen as Robert Hall Starr to protect his identity and avoid litigation. In 2002, Graysmith wrote directly about Allen in Zodiac Unmasked. Attributing victims to the Zodiac is also a popular pastime. One zodiologist has persistently claimed to also be a target of the killer. Since 2013, accusing United States Senator Ted Cruz of being the Zodiac has been a popular internet meme. The Zodiac inspired copycat killers like Heriberto Seda in New York City and Shinichiro Izuma in Japan, both of whom called themselves the Zodiac. In 2021, an anonymous author sent letters to media outlets in Albany using a Chinese Zodiac killer, sobriquet. Brian Draper and Tori Adamczyk, who perpetrated the 2006 murder of Cassie Jo Stoddart, cited the Zodiac as one of their inspirations in their homemade videos. The first film about the Zodiac killer was produced 2 years after his last confirmed murder during his letter-writing campaign. Tom Hansen's The Zodiac Killer was made as a scheme to capture the culprit. The film premiered on April 19, 1971, at the Golden Gate Theater in San Francisco. The audience were given a survey with the prompt, "I think the Zodiac kills because." They were asked to complete the sentence and promised the best response would be rewarded with a Kawasaki motorcycle. The audience surveys were secretly compared to the Zodiac's handwriting. Hansen hoped the killer's supposed egotism would lure him to the movie, and deployed volunteers to detain anyone whose handwriting matched the Zodiac's. The scheme lasted for several screenings, and in one, the volunteers actually confronted one potential suspect and held the suspect before releasing him due to lack of evidence. The Zodiac has inspired villains in multiple movies, including Scorpio in Dirty Harry, 1971, the Gemini Killer in The Exorcist III, 1990, John Doe in Seven, 1995, and the Riddler in The Batman, 2022. The Zodiac case is also the subject of the film Zodiac, 2007, directed by David Fincher, who also directed Seven. Fincher grew up in the Bay Area during the Zodiac killings. The film was an adaptation of Robert Graysmith's books, focusing on Graysmith and Paul Avery's investigation over 23 years. The filmmakers extensively researched the case, conducting interviews with people involved in the case. The film posits Arthur Lee Allen's culpability and led to more public interest in the Zodiac. Samaritan, the 17th episode of the second season of the TV series Lou Grant has the newspaper staff investigating several attacks attributed to the so-called Samaritan killer, who resembles Zodiac. The attacks turn out to be the responsibility of a retired journalist obsessed with the Samaritan case.